Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
I'm sure I'm the only one who's ever struggled with impulse control. You know, you kind of lose your cool for a moment. You get poked, provoked, irritated with something. It might be traffic. It might be that gnat that gets in the car, or that fly that gets in the car, and you're driving on the road and it's all up in your face and in your windshield, and you're smacking the windshield. You look like a crazy person driving down the road, but you've got to get rid of that irritant like right now. And sometimes that irritant that you feel like you've got to get rid of right now, that thing you've got to control right now, is a relationship. And great leaders, they think differently about that. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I can tell you over the course of my life, I'm not even going to try to count them, the number of times that I've had impulsive responses to something that was said, something that was done, something that happened. Many years ago, it's been almost 20 years ago now, we had a neighbor. Now, our neighbor, when we first met them, was pretty cool. We'd hang out together. We used to have block parties on a regular basis. We took them to a retreat with us in Houston one time. Took them all the way to Houston, paid for the hotel room, the whole 9 yards. On the way back from Houston, I had an old truck, a 99, I think it was, red Suburban. And my windshield wiper would get stuck sometimes, like halfway through. And as I'm driving out of Houston and it's raining and the windshield wiper would do its thing and then stop right in front of me, I finally just got so frustrated with the windshield wiper that I punched the window. And the passenger, this neighbor of ours, he looked at me and he said, "I've been a Golden Gloves boxer since I was in the Marine Corps. I've done time in prison because of my violent reactions, and I've never seen anybody hit a windshield hard enough to break it." Now, I don't know if that was the beginning of the decay of our relationship, that moment of outburst of me, or if it's later when our kids decided to play around on their vehicle and left marks for about a week that eventually went away. It was a dent in the roof, and the sun caused the metal to expand in it. The dent went away. In fact, by the time we got to small claims court, the dent wasn't even visible, but we still had to pay out of pocket. And he was so determined to get that $1,500. He wanted the cash. Eventually, he sold the truck. It didn't cost him anything when he traded it in, but he got that extra $1,500 to pay for the down payment. And that kind of burned our relationship. Now, I'm not sure all the things that went into it. I do know at one time we gave them a copy of The Proper Care and Feeding of Husbands because the relationship was in trouble, and we counseled them and we spent time with them. And when he wrecked his motorcycle and there was nobody else around, I was the one that went to the scene of the accident, and I was the one that followed the ambulance to the hospital, and I was the one that was there when he walked out of the hospital room and his wife was freaking out and had no shoulder to cry on. That was my wife and I. But all of that was pushed aside very quickly over $1,500. The accusations, the lies, the manipulation, all of it went south over the damage to a vehicle that wasn't even evident damage. Now, right or wrong, the kid should have never been playing on his truck. The reality was there were 9 of them and only 2 of those were mine, and I ended up the only one paying because the other people refused to go to court. They thought the whole thing was a joke. The judge did not. And so I got to pay the whole damages fee to him and his court costs and my court costs. And by the time the whole thing was said and done, no one else ever even mentioned it again. But our relationship with that couple was done. Now, I'm going to ask if there's a chance that in the course of your life, you have had those relationships that went south. And maybe those relationships went south because of something you did, or something they did, Or maybe they went south because of something completely outside of your control. You didn't say anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. They didn't say anything wrong. They didn't do anything wrong. But these outside influences, other people, events, things in life that just happen, an opportunity to make some money, a job promotion. See, when these little things happen, sometimes they happen at the expense of your best relationships. Sometimes they happen at the expense of your greatest opportunities. Sometimes, in fact, what looks like an opportunity now, it's a short term. It's a job hop. It's a chance for something newer, bigger, better, greater, or so it seems. And so we move to this new opportunity, and we do so at the peril of relationships we've invested a lot in. And I'm going to tell you, there are times in our lives that short-sightedness, that right now relationship, that get the money in the bank, sell the car, move to the new house, take the promotion, it's a bad idea. And sometimes you'll find that out soon. It may be soon enough to recover the relationship. And sometimes you get impetuous and you make moves that you think right now this looks awesome. I can tell you another sequence from my own life. I stumbled into a job. Literally, I was selling advertising when I walked in the door. And I overheard the guy, because he told me, don't leave, I do want to talk to you, but I need to finish this phone call. And so I sat in the lobby of his little retail store while I listened to him have a pretty intense argument with someone else about a business that he had purchased. And there was just enough raw detail in the conversation that I overheard from one side that I knew what he was talking about. And I mentioned it, and I said, "Are you talking about X, Y, Z?" He said, "Yes, I am. I don't know how you could know that." And I said, "Well, because the last person who successfully ran that business was me. And they pushed me out to give their daughter a job." And he said, "Well, their daughter has absolutely destroyed the business, and now there's nothing left of it. And what I bought was based on the numbers that you were producing, and what she's produced is completely different. They've lost a large portion of it. What would you charge me to come back and fix it?" And so I took the job opportunity, and I went and I ran the business, and I ran the business for several weeks. And I told him, the damage that has been done is irreparable. You'll be better off to sell the equipment, sell the business, because what they've done to your reputation in this marketplace can't be undone. But I am going to tell you got 4 or 5 employees. He owned a few restaurants and a couple of other businesses. I said, "You've got a couple of employees that'd be worth keeping, moving to your other location. They're good, they're solid, they're dependable, they show up on time, they do their work, they follow the instructions they're given. You can't do much better than that." And he said, "So what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I wasn't looking for a job when I got this one, but I'll find another one. I'm fine." He said, "Well, what about one of the other businesses that I run? I could use your help in one of those." And I said, "Fine." So I took in another position and worked under another person. And then I realized that person was embezzling, and that person was lying, and that person was riding the clock, and that person wasn't doing the job they were being paid to do. And they had a bunch of errors that were actually costing the company massive amounts of money, like 10 grand over the course of a year. And so that person left, and I was asked to replace them. So now I'm the manager over this, and I'm overseeing 2 or 3 of his businesses and living in his lake house, and all of this is going well, and promotions coming along and opportunities coming along. And at one point, I get a call to leave that part of the state, go to another part of the state to launch a business that's brand new. Literally, they have the business space, and that's it. And they're like, "Can you come and write our SOPs, the standard operating procedures, and develop the marketplace and the business, and get out in the community and build this business up from ground zero? Can you help us to build this business?" And they made me a job offer, and I was like, "Well, yeah." And when I went back to my current employer and I said, "Hey, this is the opportunity that I have," what I thought was maybe he would say, "I'll match it or I'll beat it." He didn't. He said, "Why don't you stay and I'll sell you the business?" In fact, I'll owner finance it. You don't owe me anything. You've made me so much money in this point. You just take over what all the bills are, pay those bills, and we'll split the profit 50-50. Now, I look back on that moment almost 30 years later, and I realize that was a golden egg moment. But I had no mentors. I had no advisors. I had no relationships that would make this good advice. No one looked in my life and went, well, let's go through the pros and the cons. Let's look at the actual numbers. Let's write a business plan of what this business could be doing, should be doing, is doing, and let's see how it nails down it. Right now, you get a paycheck. You have a guaranteed paycheck. But you could have a business. That would have been a business of my own to run at 25 years old. And I'd already proven I could run it. But I didn't have a single mentor or advisor in my life who would go, that's a good opportunity. No, in fact, I'd been told by one individual, if the businesses around you were as strong as you think they are, XYZ company would have already done such and such. Well, that was my plan, and I told them that, and they said, no, it's a dumb idea. Well, less than 6 months later, that company did follow that plan that I concocted and made over $1 million in the first year. Maybe my ideas weren't so bad, but I went for the security. And so instead of taking the buyout opportunity, the self-funded owner finance opportunity to build the business, I packed my bags and I left for a $4,000 pay raise. Now, if you know anything about income, you add a kid to your family, you had a move to your family, you had a new job and a new location to your family, a $4,000 pay raise doesn't cover the cost of the move, much less everything else that goes into it. But I did. And here's where I learned one of my first leadership lessons. On the way out the door, I burned bridges. Yeah. I was spiteful. I was mean. I was arrogant. I was so convinced that moving to this new position meant I had achieved, I had arrived, I had something to prove, and I was going to prove it. Ended up in a legal battle between me and my former employer, a guy whose house I had lived in, a guy who had paid me, who had given me his use of his car, who had let me drive across the state in his other vehicles, a guy who had given a lot. He was only about 10 years my senior, but he had given a lot toward me. He had given me huge opportunity. He had mentored me in some ways, and I was too young and too blind and too uninformed to see it. And so he filed criminal charges for some money he thought was missing, and I said that's not the case. And they did an investigation. They came back and said it's not the case, and the charges are unfounded, and so we're going to completely dismiss the case. And they asked me if I wanted to file charges on him for a false police report. And I'm like, no, I don't care, but I'm not paying all these income taxes that he thinks I owe because he was supposed to be taking those out of my check. I was a W-2 employee. And so I counterfiled for unemployment and got the unemployment, and he had to pay the taxes. And guess what? None of that added up to the $4,000 pay raise. And guess what else? It completely burned the bridge. There was no going back to that opportunity. There was no going back to that relationship. It was done. Cut the head off the snake. That relationship was over. There was no reversing it. 2 years later, somebody did buy that business. Small company called mailboxes, etc. And less than 6 months later, somebody bought that business, another small company called UPS. Yes. I could have, before 30 years old, sold out a business that I owner financed because I had run it well for a year and a half. I could have sold out that business to a major multi-billion-dollar multinational company. But I didn't have mentors or advisors in my life. I didn't have the will, the mind, the knowledge, the heart to listen to an opportunity. I didn't recognize it. Oh, for what it's worth, I did take the other job, and it lasted less than 2 months. Turns out the conversations that I have with people on a normal basis about my faith and about life and about who we are as human beings deeply offended the owners of that company. And they threatened several times to fire me, and finally I had another opportunity and I just left. Now, I learned a lot from that, from both of those transitions. As I moved into the next company, I began to focus more on relationships, short-term and long-term. And one of those next steps, the next company that I went to work for was a print shop, which led to a customer, which led to being a boss. And I was texting that guy, that boss, that fourth jump. I was texting that guy Sunday. He's in Nigeria right now. For over 30 years, we've been doing business and ministry together because we've focused on the value of the relationship, not the temporary paychecks. And let me tell you, every deal has layers. Every relationship between a leader and another leader, between a leader and someone they lead, between a leader and a nemesis, a competitor, an opponent. I'm reluctant to use the word enemy since I heard Dr. Jordan Peterson talk about the difference between an enemy and an opponent. The enemy is the one that you not only must conquer, but your best intent is to leave them for dead or to ensure that they are. There's no level of politics or business where enemy should define the people that you stand face to face with. Now, this is a faith-based philosophy of mine. I believe that all men are designed for redemption. And it doesn't matter how bad they are. It doesn't matter the mistakes they've made. Thank God my skeletons are in abundance in my closet. I clean them out as regularly as I can, and they just keep stacking back up. But what I don't want to do is fill that with the skeletons of relationships that I've burned because I saw someone as an enemy and not as an opponent. See, the difference between the enemy and the opponent is the enemy on the battlefield, to end them, to end their life is your primary goal. That's an enemy. An opponent, on the other hand, might be across from you in a card game, on the other end of the basketball court, on the other end of the football field, the tennis court, the soccer field. But at the end of the game, you high five, you have lunch together. That's an opponent. They may push you to your limits. They may drag the deepest, darkest, meanness out of you along the way. But at the end of the game, you high five. Watch the best sportsmanships. Listen to somebody like Tom Brady talk about the people that he played against in the NFL throughout the course of his career. Troy Aikman, the same thing. They have powerful things to say about people who would rush across that line and slam them to the ground. They will tell you, I hated to look across and see them, but I loved it when they were on my team. I loved their passion. I loved their play. Or I hated to see them on the other side of the field, but we were great friends now. That's what happens when you put relationship over cash flow. Now, see, some people, they'll put control over relationships. They'll put convenience over relationships. That's what I did. I looked at the opportunity to get a $4,000 annual raise, which is a little bit of nothing, as a reason to walk away from a relationship I'd been cultivating for almost 2 years. There's no sense in that. There was no value in that. It was a bad choice. I like to think I won't do that again. I like to think I'm smarter than that. I've got more wit about me than that. I've got more experience about me than that. But I can tell you there are still those times that I look at a relationship and realize there's nothing profitable here. Not emotionally, not spiritually, not intellectually, perhaps not financially. And because that's true, there's just nothing here. There's a philosophy that says either you work with me or you work against me. It's as simple as that. You gather with me or you scatter abroad. You choose. But what I don't want to do as a leader is to just cut people off because it's inconvenient for the day. See, at that moment, that's the equivalent of a $400 windshield being smashed because of a gnat. Yeah, I wear rings on both fingers. When that gnat flies across my windshield, I'm very tempted to just backhand it and smash it against the windshield, but I realize I'm not paying for another windshield if I don't have to. Those things are pricey. And the gnat's life isn't worth it. I'd rather let it stay in the car on a summer day and suffocate than to crack my windshield trying to kill it. But see, those impulsive relationship reactions, those are the ones that cost you. There's a reason that coaches and mentors and leaders have a gauntlet. It's the number one tool for a coach or a mentor or a leader. And that gauntlet sometimes has to be thrown down early in the relationship, sometimes even before the beginning of the relationship, to put the test of the mettle, M-E-T-T-L-E, of a person on the forefront. What kind of people are they? What kind of decisions do they make? How do they treat others in those circumstances? You see the little highlight reels and stuff all over social media because they're in almost every movie. The guy who watches how someone treats the server to discern whether or not they're worth hiring. John Maxwell has talked about that, having an interview with somebody that he was thinking about bringing on board his company, but when he saw how rude they were to the server at the restaurant, he never even told them it was an interview. He was considering them as a candidate, and they disqualified themselves before the conversation started. That's a gauntlet. Now, understand that these layers of deals, they might include just you and the person in front of you, the opponent, the would-be teammate. Maybe the deal that you're making in this leadership relationship, it's one-to-one. Maybe it's one-to-many, and you're being considered by a company, or you're considering a company as a partner. Or maybe the deal's being made and you don't realize that the person you're negotiating with also has 5, 6, 7 layers of people in their hip pocket that they have to answer to, they have to be responsible to. And you may not realize that there are events outside of your relationship that have nothing to do with you that are still going to play into the value of this relationship. So whether it's outside people, it's outside events, it's secondary and tertiary relationships. If you negotiate, and if you listen to some of the high-level politicians, the generals, the senators, the congressmen, the governors, the presidents, you listen close to what they say, and I have almost every biography from presidents, biography or autobiography going back to 2000 and a little over 2 decades. I'm continuing to collect them. It's fascinating to listen to how they think after they're out of office. Listen to how they talk about navigating and negotiating a relationship one-on-one when they know that this person can't be fully honest with me because that person has something on them. Or if I'm negotiating with this person, I'm really negotiating with this entire committee or this entire resolution, like NATO and Russia. It's not a one-to-one relationship. What happens in Ukraine, what happens in Russia, it's not just between them. There's a whole lot more at play. The same with Gaza and Israel, the same with the US and Mexico. It's not like one person makes one decision and that's the end of it. It doesn't work that way. But as a leader, you've got to decide which is more valuable. The convenience, the control, the cash flow of the moment, or the relationship that may completely morph over the next 2, 5, 10 years. I can tell you there were times that Mike Arnold and I, we butted heads. We raised our voices. We disagreed vehemently. We competed on the dartboard and the pool table in every other way. We've even competed against each other in an IQ test race. Yeah, competitive, gristly kind of people. But if you were to call me and say, I'm in a crisis and you're the only one that's going to solve it, I would drop everything to find a way to do it. Probably 3, 4 people on earth, besides my children, for whom that's true, that I would drop everything and find a way to fix it. Those kind of relationships are hard to find. Sometimes it's a boss, sometimes it's a mentor, sometimes it's a competitor, sometimes it's an opponent. And all of those are okay. But I'm going to tell you what's not okay. If you don't believe that all humans are redeemable and eventually they'll do right, then you'll spend your life burning bridges, walking away because you didn't get your way. You'll be like that 2-year-old throwing a temper tantrum the rest of your life. As a leader, that's a really bad posture. You may feel like you're winning in the moment that your temper tantrum gets you what you want. The bigger challenge is going to be asking later, did I really want what I got? Was it worth the price that I paid for it? I walked away from an owner finance opportunity to buy a business that later sold for millions. I could have been in it for nothing. for the sweat equity that I'd already invested. I didn't have the sense. I didn't have the mentors. I didn't have the advisors. I didn't have the maturity. And now I don't even have the relationship. And all of that is on me. Where are you? Are you surrounded by mentors, by advisors, by leaders? Are you surrounded by relationships where somebody will say, that's a great opportunity, or whoa, 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 whoa. I know that looks great. Let me show you what the flaws are. Let me show you what's hiding behind the shadow of the elements that you don't see. Let me tell you about some tertiary relationships. Last story, I had a deal opportunity come to me. Some guy sat down across the table from me in a local coffee shop and said, we want you to do X, Y, and Z, and here's how much it'll pay, and here's how long it'll take you to do, and here's what you need to do. And I realized, one of my mentors is Laura Langmeyer. She wrote the book called Yes Energy, and she said, just say yes and figure it out later. And I said, give me 24 hours to make a decision as to whether or not I can be involved in this. And I made 2 phone calls. And the first phone call said, the person on the other line said, I don't know you well enough to get involved in a deal like that because you're talking about international law, you're talking about big money, and people with big money always come with strings. And because those strings have to cross through and delicately weave with international law, I'm out. It's not worth the risk. Not that it was illegal, but doing it right legally meant a whole lot of tap dancing and a whole lot of upfront cash flow. And I said, okay. The second one said, I'm all in with the cash, but once I put my cash in, you're out of the deal. And on both sides of that, I realized one was all in for the money and they knew the risks and they knew the reward and they knew how it would pay off. And the other one said, I don't have enough relationship with you to get involved in this. Not that it's not possible, not that we won't make a profit. It's just that I don't know you well enough to take this risk. Opportunities are going to come throughout the course of your life. And if you have the right relationships, you can step into them and execute them. And if you don't have the right relationships, those opportunities are going to pass you by. John Maxwell says all the time, luck waits at the intersection of opportunity and preparedness. And I'm going to tell you right now, sometimes your preparedness is in relationship building. Don't burn bridges because you got your panties in a wrinkle. Don't burn bridges because you didn't get what you wanted. Your temper tantrums and your impulsive reactions could cost you a whole lot more than what you can even see as possible right now. That's my advice as a leader that I wish I'd had when I was 25 years old. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. I encourage you to go to storypoweracademy.com and check it out. Look at the different classes, the different levels, the different things that are available. You can take a lot of them a la carte. But spend some time there and see if that's the kind of thing that would change the way you communicate as a leader, as a pastor, as a counselor, as a political leader. And if that will help you, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Again, only 10 people in the elite speakers. You will have to apply for that. But if you're a candidate, I'd love to have that conversation with you. I'm J Loren Norris with Story Power Academy. I look forward to seeing you inside.